Welcome to MBA 720. Recording tonight, high atop Studio 720 in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. I am Professor Seegers, your excellent host, coming to you once again tonight. Very excited, very exciting content. Lots for us to talk about, lots for us to discover tonight. And I think you're going to find this really, really interesting. So tonight's topic is getting into the 7 technologies that are remaking the world. This is an exciting research project that I did, turned into a nice publication in Sloan Management Review. And I want to take you behind the scenes. So more than talk about the outcome of the article itself, I want to take you a little bit behind the scenes as to how you do research around technology, and in particular technology forecasting. And we'll also get launched into the 7 technologies themselves. So it's a very exciting session. Happy to share it with you and happy to discuss what I've learned along the way. I've worked firsthand in a lot of these projects with a lot of these technologies, particularly when we get into the artificial intelligence piece of it a little bit later on. I can show you a lot of inside scoop, so to speak, and show you how companies are using this, kind of where that technology is, and what's being developed around it. So let's get started. Let's see if we can get into the presentation here and really start talking more about technology forecasting. So that's going to be our topic for tonight. And away we go. Great, so let's present this and get on our way. Here we go. Okay. Da-da-da-da-da-da. 7 technologies remaking the world. So we're starting to get into the technology piece of it. Now, the first thing that I want to tell you about is that in this particular session, we're not just talking about information technologies. That's not what we're talking about exclusively. We're talking about a general class of technology. So these things are a little bit more than information technologies. Anything that's impacting the world, anything that's impacting the way we live, healthcare, the way we learn, all of these things are sort of the topics of what I want to talk to you about, because I think too many times we think of only digital technology or just information technology as being the technology that's changing the world. And true enough, it is. But there are other technologies out there in the chemical sciences, in the material sciences, robotics, mechanical sciences that are really revolutionizing things. It's a very exciting world out there. One of the good things, I think, that you can take away even from this time that we're in, where we're worried about pandemics and disease and things that aren't sort of the norm for us, is that technology is marching forward and doing incredible things. And in fact, some of the technologies we talk about in the biotechnology area and in nanotechnology are going to be at the forefront of preventing the type of thing that we're experiencing here and now. And there's good news ahead, and that's what I want you to focus on. But there are also challenges ahead. So here's the article. And so this is our guide, our reading for this particular session: 7 technologies remaking the world. This was probably about a 3-year study when you start to think about the time that went into this research, interviewing over 100 technology entrepreneurs, technology executives, technology planners, technology managers, people who are in the know, and sort of trying to get at the core of what are the technologies that are really changing the world, changing the way that we will do a lot of different things. And that was really the goal of it. And funny enough, you know, as a researcher, again, to give you kind of the behind the scenes, you don't really know what you're going to see when you go into a project like this. I learned a ton, and I'm happy to share that with you. I think you're going to be excited about some of the things that you see. as we go through these technologies, but also know they're still evolving. They're still moving forward. I mean, some of these technologies are more mature than others. Some of them are doing amazing things. Others have more promise than they do a record of success. But they're all out there, and they're all remaking the world in which we live. And so this will be the core reading for this particular topic. And the goal here is to show you how research like this is done, because I think one of the things for business students that's really important is to be able to predict how technology will evolve, to be able to predict how it's going to impact commerce, to be able to predict how it might impact, our business. And I think that that's a skill that is not just for technology people. It's something that I think business people are very good at. I think it's something that for me as a technologist, I had to learn through business school how to do these types of things. So when I think of sort of the value that I got from my MBA, being an engineering type of person that was sort of seeking an MBA, it was the idea that I could forecast, I could sort of see what was happening in the future. And I think that that's a very valuable skill to have. So again, I want to take you behind the scenes and show you exactly how that's done, because I think that when you see how it's done, it might be a little counterintuitive to how you think it might be done. At least that's my hope, is that you get a little twist here and see something a little bit different. Okay, so let's go in and jump into what these technologies are and sort of how you set up a research study like this. So the idea here was not to focus too narrowly on a technology that might be changing some small piece of commerce. So, and that doesn't mean that that research isn't important, but it just wasn't big enough. I wanted something bigger when I was thinking about this research. I wanted to encompass a lot of different technologies, because what I noticed out there in my consulting and in my research was that you had these combinations of technologies. You had these new technologies that were coming in from other fields, besides the computer sciences, that were really impacting a lot of what was going on in today's marketplace. So what I wanted to do was, and it was kind of a big idea, was say, how do these technologies impact life itself? And so I had to figure out what life itself was. And that's the outer ring that you see here in this diagram. Life itself. Now, I couldn't have figured this out on my own. I went out and talked to other professors that were in sociology, psychology, the behavioral sciences, and I asked them this question: what is life? I even asked Alexa, what is life? No, they don't know. And so it's one of these things where you had to get some sort of framework for what life itself was. And so that's your outer ring. And it basically breaks down to 4 parts. Commerce, that you're going to have a set of technologies that impact commerce. And every society has to have commerce. We have to have exchange. We have to have a way of creating value. And that's the idea of commerce. And that value can change over time. Certainly right now, who would have guessed that a barrel of oil is not so important, but a 6-pack of toilet tissue is important. So commerce shifts over time. Value shifts and is created and destroyed. And so these technologies would have an impact on commerce. Let's go to the 2 o'clock position there, and that's health. There is an incredible opening field of healthcare. You can probably know that here at Kenan Flagler, we've certainly opened up a lot of discussion, and I think a lot of great courses around healthcare, the business of healthcare. And that's really because for the longest time, healthcare really wasn't much of a business. It was certainly more focused on medical sciences and treatment. And there wasn't such a business framework around it. And now that's becoming very, very important because healthcare costs are escalating. Certainly, we need to see an improvement in getting cures and treatments to the marketplace. And so now business has become an important part of healthcare. So let's go down to 5 o'clock here on the dial, and you can see learning. That was an interesting one. Every society has to learn. We have to evolve. We have to share and communicate, create knowledge, share knowledge, apply knowledge. I think that's probably the most important of the knowledge axis there, is being able to apply it, being able to understand how knowledge can be used. And so we call that learning. So when you think of learning, think of how teams, groups of people, or a society, if you want to think that largely about it, would evolve, how they would gather knowledge and create and move forward. And that's the learning piece of it. And over here to the bottom left is environment. And so if you think about environment, that's sustainability. That's creating energy. It's being more efficient with energy use, but anything that really impacts the world in which we live, the air, the water, the land. Such good news in terms of how technology is impacting that. A lot of these technologies are having tremendous effects on the environment around us, and that's just good news. It's really encouraging to go to Caltech and look at their solar panel project and start to look at the photovoltaics and a lot of the technology that they're using in solar these days that really create a lot of energy and actually efficiently transfer that to the grid. And if you're into the energy business and thinking about that, that's always been the issue, is the efficient gathering and transfer and storage of energy. And there is a lot of good news on that front. So that outer ring sort of gives us a context for studying impact. Now, the reason I went into that in some detail is because should you find yourself doing a similar type of research report or some presentation, you really want to find a context for how something is impacting, what is being influenced. And so that outer ring really gives you sort of the idea of perhaps a dependent variable. Oh, if you remember regression in mathematics, this is what it's impacting. Now, those independent variables are all there in the middle, and these are the technologies. So here's something I want you to hang on to. If you're drifting away, come back to me now. These are classes of technologies. So I don't want you to think about these 7 things as a single technology. There is no one technology called biotechnology. Biotechnology covers hundreds of technologies. 3D printing actually covers hundreds of technologies. Pervasive computing, nanotech, advanced robotics. Each one of these technologies is a class of technologies. So behind the name are hundreds of different technologies that you could group into this. But in terms of what they do, in terms of their functionality, they belong in a particular class. And I'm going to explain each one to you. We're going to go through some examples. You're going to be able to see firsthand through some captured video what these technologies do. Later on in the course, I'm actually going to take you inside some of the companies that do a lot of amazing things. Let me give you an example. Let me preview that for you because I want you to really feel excited about this. If you think about machine learning, which is sort of that whole umbrella of artificial intelligence, big data would go in there. You would have that in there as well. Machine learning and even robotics and a little bit of that pervasive computing, if you look at that sort of all together there, that's actually being used by Pixar in their RenderMan technology to enhance animation. So it's really kind of interesting to see how a company like Pixar uses artificial intelligence to develop motion picture types of technology and of course the motion pictures themselves. It's really amazing. So even in entertainment, you see a lot of these technologies accomplishing things that I would say 5 years ago we might have said that's impossible, that you can't do that, it can't happen, and yet they're able to do it. So later on in the course, not only are you going to see the technologies, you're going to see companies and see how they apply them, and it's very exciting to see that. So these are the 7 technologies. Let me just briefly give you an overview. We're going to dive into each one in depth. Biotechnology at the top is basically the study of organic material, the manipulation, the engineering of organic material. That's life itself, skin, bones, even DNA, lots of different things that are being engineered. Let's use that term, engineered, and shifted through biotechnology. So one of the things you could think of there is life sciences. So companies like Biogen and others that really work in that biotech sector there. It is probably one of the most booming sectors. It's an exciting sector. Good news for MBAs. They need business people in that sector. They've got a lot of technology in there, a lot of technologists. But you've got to, at some point, take that technology and create a business model out of it. You've got to create some way to make money at it. And I think biotech is certainly sort of well positioned for that right now. Wireless mesh networks, let's just go clockwise here. Wireless mesh networks, an exciting area. So if you've heard of 5G, if you've heard of mesh networks, this is the class of technology. Basically, it's very, very high bandwidth, short range, grid-based networking, and it's going to change a lot of things, a whole lot of things in terms of how we get content, how we share content, and the ability to create incredible content, very visual content, a lot of things in terms of visualization and data visualization that you just wouldn't believe. Holographic images all the way through, you're going to see in wireless mesh networks. Nanotechnology is the manipulation of inorganic material. So biotechnology is organic material. Nanotechnology is inorganic material. This is where we take things like iron, steel, magnesium, titanium, chemicals, and we change their natural properties. Amazing. It's amazing. Sometimes I like to think of nanotechnology as kind of like the Spider-Man technology. Oh, Spider-Man. The reason being that if you know the story of Spider-Man, Spider-Man, who in real life is Peter Parker, develops a web technology, and he shoots the web around and he swings on it, and that web is not as strong, or it doesn't look as strong as a rope. It's a very thin, transparent material, but it's like a steel cable that holds him up and allows himself to propel through the air. Well, that would be an application of nanotechnology, something that looks impossible in terms of the property of the material, but yet it's able to accomplish amazing things. You might think of super glue as a form of nanotechnology. You throw a small layer of super glue on a surface and it holds forever. That doesn't seem possible, but somehow it happens. That would be nanotechnology. Advanced robotics is one of my favorites. It's amazing to see what robotics can do in terms of precision. It's amazing to see how intelligence has started to enter the field of robotics. And so if you're watching shows like Westworld, you might start to think of how robotics are taking on human form and able to interact with us, to talk with us, and how humans respond to that. It's really kind of an interesting field. It is one of the most exciting fields. One of the companies that I consult with, Boston Dynamics, it's absolutely amazing to see what they're able to do in robotics. So we'll spend some time there and talk about and show you some of the robotics that are coming our way. Machine learning. This is my favorite. This is my area. Believe it or not. Years and years ago, as a young engineering computer science student, that has been my field, is machine learning or artificial intelligence. I started programming in a technology called list processing. IBM had a technology years back called Intellect, where we would program robotics. So if you look at sort of the connection between artificial intelligence and advanced robotics, one of the things that I really enjoyed was programming robotics, and I still do a little bit of that. It's a lot of fun. I think you're going to be excited about machine learning. There are some really cool applications for it, but there's a lot of misunderstanding about it. It's kind of interesting to see some business people and even some professors talk about machine learning. They get some of it right. They dance around some of it. What I'm hoping to do is give you a definition and show you how it's being used, particularly in the Event Horizon Telescope, an exciting combination of efforts between MIT and Harvard as they try to photograph objects in deep space, in particular black holes. I'm going to show you how they're using machine learning to do that. Fascinating technology. 3D printing, this is one you probably know and love. Let me tell you this, we're at the starting line of what 3D printing will be and how it will impact things. We can print simple things these days. You can even print metal. You can print a lot. There are a lot of resins out there that allow you to print a lot of heavy duty stuff. What's really interesting is how it's moving into the field of biotechnology, where we're starting to pioneer the frontier, if you will, of printing skin cells, of printing blood vessels. Yes, taking cells and printing organs, kidneys, livers. That's kind of where we're at now. That reality may be far out, and it may not be far out. It's certainly sort of the next jump when you think about 3D printing. And there in the middle is pervasive computing. I would say that pervasive computing, that's sort of cast as the Internet of Things. No problem casting it that way. There is a network of things out there, but what's really interesting about that is how the computing technology, the processing technology, the storage technology, and the communications technology. So if you think of digital devices as communications, processing, and storage. It's a great way to think about that. Those three things, that trifecta, so to speak, communications, processing, storage, has always been embodied on the desktop in a single box. And you'll hear it talked about that quite a bit. What's really interesting about pervasive computing is that trifecta is now moving out into devices such as the iWatch and other wearable devices. It is moving into implantable devices at a rapid rate, and it's moving into the world around us. And that would be pervasive computing. So what I want you to think about there is a little bit more than just stuff being bound together by a network. It's okay to think about it that way. A lot of people cast it that way. But I think if you get into the real technology game, what we're really talking about there is that trifecta of communications, processing, storage, moving out of a bundled device into many different devices that are connected. I'll show you that. Don't worry about it. We'll get there, and I'll show you some examples of that. But it's a really cool phenomena if you think about it. And it again, what you need to do here is get the definitions. I'm going to give you all these definitions and show you some examples. But I want you to always have on your MBA thinking cap. Okay, I want you to be thinking like an MBA. I mean, the goal of this course is not to have you thinking like me. If you start thinking like me, you end up sitting up late nights with Yoda talking into your computer. You don't want that. You want to be out there in the world of commerce and doing great things. That's what you signed up for. So think about business applications as I go through this. Now take the definitions and use them, but think about, how is this changing the world of business around me? So this is a great model to use for thinking about how business is changing. In fact, when I go out consulting with companies, I will take this particular model, and they start talking about how they feel like their products are going to change. Their supply chain might change. Customers are changing because of these technologies. We need to change because of these technologies. And so I think this is a great way to start your path of creating strategy, creating business models. So I want you to always be thinking about that. Enjoy the definitions, but be thinking, what does this mean for business? And over there on the far right, intelligence, natural interface, and ubiquity. These are the things that are behind all of these technologies. Technologies are becoming smarter. They're more than responsive, they're actually prescriptive. And it's the idea that a technology can give you advice. It can tell you something, suggest something to you. And hopefully more than just being bombarded by ads on Facebook. What we're talking about here are smart devices that can work through a large amount of data and perhaps give you some clues about what data is important to the issue you're trying to solve and what data may not be important. Natural interface, this is a big one. When you think about applying technologies in business, you want them to be easy to use. I'm a big fan of simplification when it comes to technology design. Trying to make things intuitive, try to make them more of a natural interface. And ubiquity means that they're not observable in the world around us. So you don't see glaring screens at you. Perhaps a display is embedded in a mirror at the bottom left of that mirror, and it's ubiquitous. It's part of an everyday device and not a device that in and of itself is separate. So those three things underlie this whole model. So this is the 7 technologies that are remaking the world. And we're going to go into each one in the next few weeks. So what I'm going to do is try to record a session, or I will record a session for each one of the technologies that you can then go through and think about. We'll have a lot of videos along the way, a lot of illustration. So I'm not going to just give you a definition. I'll show you how these things are changing the world around you. Okay, so what I want to do now is kind of show you how that model came to be. So how can you take an article like this or a piece of research and say, what can I do with it? How would I apply it once I'm out there working in the world and making a difference when I'm out there trying to make a mark? And the way you do that is through a technique called technology forecasting. This is something that I think in the engineering sciences has been fairly known for a while. It was certainly something that I was exposed to probably around senior year, maybe some when I started working. Certainly in the time that I spent with Apple, we did this quite a bit. You're out there looking around and trying to figure out what the technology was saying to you. I know that sounds kind of artsy or a little bit Black Mirror-like, but it was just really true. I mean, things that you can hold, things that you can see are messages. They tell you things about what might be. They tell you things about what customers expect and what is possible. And that's sort of the goal of technology forecasting. Now, the way I use it practically every year is in the CNBC Disruptor 50. Basically what we do is in the Disruptor 50 is we identify the 50 companies that are creating technologies that are going to disrupt everything from manufacturing to financial services. I'd say certainly in the last two surveys that we did, you really saw a lot of companies bubble up that were more in that fintech space. And I think that the promise was there. I think it's still there, but you really didn't see the big breakthrough that you thought you were going to see in blockchain or whatever. And don't worry if you don't know what blockchain is. We're going to get to that when we get to machine learning. But I would say that it's now shifting these days more on that pervasive computing side. You're starting to see a lot of holographic imaging, which is really, really cool. Oh, and healthcare. A lot of companies this year are bubbling up in healthcare. So basically, I'm on the advisory council. Not only am I on the advisory council, Greg Brown, who is also a professor here at Kenan-Flagler, is on the council. There are members from Berkeley, from Michigan, from all the top places, but UNC, we have 2 people on that advisory council. And at last count, I did not see anybody from Duke. Okay, so we use this methodology quite a bit in the advisory council to try to identify those companies that that are creating the technologies that are going to really, really change the world. So what I want to do in the remainder of this segment is talk to you a little bit about that. Okay, now this is also in your project list. You have 6 projects that you can choose from. And this is project number 1, technology forecasting. So if you're interested in this, you get to choose 2. Choose this one. It is a lot of fun. This is one of my favorite techniques. Okay, so here we go. The wheel of technology forecasting. Now what we're going to do here is let's start to the far left, trends and reference science. That's where it begins. Now you see it as a wheel, but what I'm going to do is take you through the wheel in the order that you need to get started on the wheel, if that makes sense. Once you're in the roundabout, you can keep going until you come up with ideas, but you need to get into the roundabout. So the trends and reference sciences, that is your entry into the rotary or the roundabout. Trends and reference sciences. This is so important. So, okay, hang on here. You have to start not with the technologies themselves. Once you can see, touch, and use a technology, it's too late to forecast. You have to go back to the sciences that produce the technology to really understand what it means, how it's going to combine with other technologies, and to see its final form. One of the things that's really interesting is this idea that you'll see a technology and you think that it has manifested itself in its final form. That is rarely true. It's rarely true. Typically, you see a technology and it's in some form, but maybe not final form. I would even say an example of this might be the flip phone from years ago. If you remember, maybe you saw your parents use the old flip phones. They would open up the flip phones and they would have the little antennae that would be out there, and they would be talking, a little punch button, all that. That would be probably a form of what a smartphone would be, but it wasn't the final form. I would say iPhone really was sort of that first generation of final form technology. When you had the touch screen, you had the integration of email with music, with content, that integration piece in there. Then you were starting to see what was a fairly mature and final form of a mobile device. I would say iPhone was kind of that that final device. The flip phone was sort of in between that. And good technology forecasting, you can recognize that. It's really important because a lot of companies will say, okay, well, the flip phone's it. That's the final manifestation of the device. And so we're just going to build a lot of flip phones, and we're going to be okay. Good technology forecasters know that there's more to come, and you can kind of tell when a technology has reached that final form. And to me, certainly with smartphones, it was that convergence form where you saw email and voice combining with video content, and the touch screen, the interface piece really sort of solidified that. But to have known that flip phone was an intermediate technology, not the final form, I would have had to have known what was going on in reference sciences. You need to know that in the materials and information sciences, what was really happening there was technology was coming out, touchscreen technology, that was going to change that flip phone. You would have been able to see that if you were starting on the far left there in trends and reference sciences. So what you want to do when you're really trying to understand technology is try to try to lessen the influence of what you see out there, the technology that you can now see, lessen that influence a little bit and increase the influence of what you see in reference sciences. Now, here you can see what we've got are 7 of them, and I think they're all important. If you want to know how I go in and technology forecast, what I was looking at when I wrote the article for MIT on 7 technologies, I was really rooted in these sciences. There are 7. They're the information sciences. We're going to go through them in just a minute. The life sciences, the biological sciences, that is so key to follow that one. It's a fast-moving science. The material sciences, anything to do with metal, steel. This would be nanotechnology. The chemical sciences are fascinating. One of the great things about UNC, so I'm just going to do a little public service announcement here. One of the great things, and there are many great things about the University of North Carolina, I love the place with all my heart, is the the chemistry department at UNC. It's world class. I mean, we have incredible chemists over there that develop a lot of cool technology for us. And one of the centers that I run at the university level is the North Carolina Policy Collaboratory. And we take money from government and from industry, and we invest it into departments at UNC. And the chemistry department here at UNC has really been important in our efforts to clean up water in North Carolina, to test wells. They actually developed a swatch that anybody can get. So we make them available to anybody that has a well or is concerned about their water in North Carolina. You run the water on the small swatch. It looks like a little cotton square, and it will tell you exactly what chemicals you've got in that water and whether any of them are harmful. That's the chemical piece of it. It's really interesting to see how that field has evolved. Certainly it has a lot of implications for 3D printing as well. The computer sciences, it's the one that I came out of. Computer sciences are constantly changing. These days, certainly one of the cool technologies that I'm going to show you is data visualization, using holographic data, using big data, and creating bubble charts. I'm going to show you later on in the course some bubble diagrams from Twitter accounts that was done by MIT Media Lab. And you can actually see sort of the nature, if you want to, of social media. It's really fun to watch. I don't think you'll be shocked by what you see, but to see it in that form really gives you a lot of insight. The engineering sciences really gets into what I think of as mechanics, electrical. There's a lot going on there. Robotics is very, very big there. And I would say finally, one of the big fields out there is the behavioral sciences. You can't ignore that. I would say that is where I'm the least strongest, but when I started working with Apple on the iPod project years ago, I really came to appreciate the behavioral sciences, trying to understand what people wanted, how they thought about music, the idea of a playlist. These are all psychological constructs that are really important, really, really important. Let's move on to the 12 o'clock position there. After you see trends in reference sciences, what you do is you look for first form technologies. These are physical manifestations of some of the trends that you find in the reference sciences. So again, you're looking for biotech, nanotech, 3D printing. You're looking for early forms. Now again, here what you have to do is not get so caught up in the fact that that might be the final form. It rarely is. But you see early manifestations, early things coming out. It was kind of interesting going back to the CNBC Disruptor 50. Sometimes I would say in that Disruptor 50, let me just think here for a second, there may be up to 33% to 40% of those technologies that may be first or second form, not really manifest, or their final form, so to speak. That's okay. I mean, that gives you a lot of information, and you can start to see what form factors are, how something appears physically. It's really important to kind of find those, but know that that might not be the final form. It might be first form, or sometimes you hear a second form type of technologies there. So you're looking for physical representation. So right now, if you think of a trend in reference sciences, certainly in data management, there is the trend of trying to arrange data so that it is it mirrors transactions rather than the actors in the transaction. That's blockchain, basically. We're seeing some early forms of that technology out. Bitcoin might be an early form of blockchain. It gives you histories of transactions. Even Venmo is a little bit like this. It's transaction based, and data, if you will, are exchanges are recorded as transactions rather than by party A, party B. That's a part of it, but it's a transaction. That's sort of the center, front and center of the data collection. I'd say we're kind of still in early forms of blockchain. Everybody's excited about it, but in terms of the manifest of it, it's early form right now. Very few business cases, maybe some promising business cases, but nothing that's really jumped out in blockchain yet. And again, the reference sciences for blockchain would be the informational sciences and the computer sciences, and maybe even a little bit of behavioral sciences there. New business models. This is where you start to take it and say, this is going to change commerce. It's going to change the way we do business. We may see different businesses. We may see different things in the marketplace because of these technologies. Now, this wheel spins. It's hard to put sort of this process, if you will, into a two-dimensional form like this that you can see. But what you have to think about is, and the way I think about it is a rotary. You've got cars or a roundabout, that are going around the rotary. The entrance point into the rotary are the reference sciences, and inside the rotary, you might see first form technologies, and then you might see new business models as spokes on the rotary. But some technologies may spin in that rotary a lot longer than others. But that's the way I think about it. That's the way you should think about it, should you choose to do this project. Again, if you look at the Project One description, what you have to do is fairly simple, is really track a technology through this cycle and talk about, at the end of the project, what you think the new business models might be. I have several students that have done everything from fintech to blockchain to Bitcoin. It's a great way to track a technology as it enters the rotary and goes through the wheel of technology forecasting. So let's go through and talk about the reference sciences to kind of wrap up here and give you some background into what they are and why they're important. A reference science basically is the science that underlies the innovation. And as I told you, there are 7. They're important. These are the things that I pay attention to. Now, where can you find information on what's going on in these sciences if you're a business-minded student? I think there are two very good journals, both of them out of MIT, that I follow and that I really like. The first one is the MIT Technology Review. It's really, really good. Super in terms of taking what's going on out there and making it understandable. And they do apply it a lot to business. So you'll see a lot of good business discussion in their articles. And of course, MIT Sloan Management Review is also very good. I think Wall Street Journal does a really good job with their technology section. So I follow that. And that's about the three that I follow that I really like. So if you just friend to friend, just telling you what I follow in terms of trying to find what's going on in technology and trying to predict the future, those are the three that I really like. So let's jump in here and just take a look. The information sciences, again, UNC has an incredible school of information science right here on campus. But basically, you're looking at analysis, classification, manipulation of data. This is the trifecta I talked to you about earlier: the processing, storage, and even the communication of data, how it's created, how it's stored, how knowledge is used in an organization. I think the information sciences are not studied enough by business scholars, and certainly not by leaders, because they think it's IT. It just couldn't be more wrong. I mean, if you take a look at what's going on in the information sciences right now in terms of data visualization, the tracking of social media. I'm working with a company right now called Quantify, where we're actually tracking the social media and developing constructs out of it that can tell you about different behavioral aspects of the people that use social media. And one of the first early business cases of that was to try to identify a potential suicide case in social media. And the company was actually featured on CNBC for that. But Quantify is a company and heavy in the field of information science. There's a lot going on there. It is not IT. It is not the IT people. These are scientists that really look at how information is created, how it's used, and what it means. So a great field to study, and you'll see a lot of cool trends in that field. Life sciences. Life sciences are the biological sciences. This is a fast-growing industry. Again, as I told you earlier, they're on the lookout for business people to come in and help them create revenue streams and to create business models for their inventions. But basically, this is really getting into the idea of manipulating cells, manipulating DNA. Everything from crop engineering down to cell engineering to stem cell research is part of life sciences. Huge field out there. Perhaps one of the more promising fields for creating life-saving types of treatments. Amazing what's going on in life sciences. In fact, even for the coronavirus that's certainly on the top of our minds these days, it's going to be a revolution in life sciences. You'll see probably life sciences and nanotech. You're probably going to see some of the treatments and some of the good science come out of that. The material sciences. So this is really interesting. New materials, solids, not so much looking at life sciences here. Now you're looking at inorganic material, chemistry, engineering. This is one that I would say is not the most exciting field for a lot of people, but this is the heart and soul of 3D printing right here, coming right out of the material sciences, which is really re-engineering the atomic structure. So if you look at inorganic material made of atoms, and certainly you're looking at cells as the building block in organic material in the life sciences. So how we go into the atomic structure and rearrange atoms to create new materials and new properties or for those materials. That would be the material sciences. There's a lot of interesting things. If you're interested in solar, this is your field right here. This is your reference science. A lot going on there in terms of trying to store electricity and gather electricity in solar energy and other sources. So the material science is actually heavily invested in by Google, believe it or not, in their grid computing, in their grid electricity projects. So see a lot of that in Google. Chemical sciences, again, talked about that a little bit, but what you're really looking at here is the idea of chemistry. So the combination of chemicals to create new things. Chemical sciences also underlies 3D printing. It's a chemical revolution. Don't get focused on the machines that create 3D printing. It's the chemicals behind the machines that are really, really important. Again, the interplay of physics and biology here. It is an important science, and as you can see here in the description, sometimes called the central science, because you're looking at the both theory and applied scientific disciplines here. So it's really interesting. I would have to say that chemistry was one of the classes I just avoided, but as a researcher and a technology forecaster, it's really, really important. Computer sciences, yay, hey, this is a great one. Processes that interact with data. This really gets into not just only software, but hardware as well. You really got to, and that's why I really purposefully here put a lot of the circuits on the left-hand side and some of the new form factors that you're going to see with this. So it's the study of circuits. It's a study of algorithms, again, to store, communicate, and process information. So the information itself is in the information sciences. The computer sciences transforms it into other forms, into analytics, if you will, shares it. Computer science is actually, I think, unrightfully given this reputation of being hard to understand and just out of reach. Nothing could be further from the truth. I don't think that anybody has to understand the design of a circuit to really understand what those circuits might do. Again, if you get into quantum computing, this is computer sciences, probably combined with a little bit of the engineering sciences too. But quantum is huge, and it's one of these technologies coming out of computer science that there's a lot of excitement about, and it could revolutionize the whole industry. So again, from a business standpoint, you would want to understand the basics of what it means, I think technically, but I think more than that, you understand what it might do, how it might change things. Engineering sciences. Engineering sciences really gets into mechanics. I think of this as robotics. Processes is another piece of this, but you're looking at sort of an integrative effort here in engineering, sometimes combining chemistry and biology, math, but really it gets down to, in terms of how I think about engineering, electrical, mechanical, and civil engineering. Civil engineering certainly concerned with sustainability issues, mechanical, more the robotics, machines, and engineering certainly is, of course, energy, power, transfer of electricity. And I think that when you think of the engineering sciences, you're starting to really see, again, this be more of an integrative science. It's starting to combine with computer science. Certainly, when I started undergraduate school, that was just beginning. And usually you would start in an engineering science and combine it with a computer science. Then computer science kind of went out on its own. Now they're kind of combining together again. So it's kind of fun to see that in terms of college curriculum. Very, very important, evolving in incredible ways. The behavioral sciences. I love the behavioral sciences. They're good. I wish I were better at it, I guess, is what I wish. But if you look at economics, psychology, decision sciences, it's super important trying to understand our everyday walk in life, why people do the things they do. why they feel the way they do. I think it's an incredible field. I don't think I really fully appreciated it until I got into the working world and you started building technologies. And you would think you would have this great technology and you would think that people would just love it, and they didn't. And you would say, wow, that's interesting. Why don't you love this perfect technology? Well, I think many times we had not thought about, the real need. And let me just go ahead and give you a war story there. Certainly, I think in the Apple iPod project, the first big idea there was perfect music. That, if you really thought about the behavioral aspect of someone that loved music, they wanted to hear music in its purest form. So one of the conversations that went around was that MP3 may not be good enough. Just wouldn't be good enough. There's got to be a better format, a better way to encode. And there still is, by the way, better sounds out there, better ways to encode music. But what people really wanted was mobility. They really didn't care about perfect music. And that had to be discovered, believe it or not. It had to be discovered that that mobility, being able to listen to any song you wanted, wherever you wanted, was more important than that song being perfectly reproduced, if that makes sense. I hope it does. That the sound quality wasn't as important. It had to be good enough. I mean, it couldn't sound like trash, but it was you were more driven by the ability to be mobile. So that was a finding out of the behavioral sciences that drove what Apple did in the engineering and design of the product. I was surprised. I'll have to say, I was a little surprised by that. I never forgot it, how important behavioral sciences can be in trying to guide us as we think about technology. Now, throughout all of these, what are you looking for? You're looking for the trends. Now, trends explain a lot of things. One of the ways I like to think about a trend is if you take your smartphone, take your iPhone or take your iPad or any technology that you have, your watch, and ask yourself, what trends does it represent? So if you think about a smartphone, it certainly represents convergence. The idea that you have data, you have voice, you have a lot of these things converged into one device. I think it also represents simplicity. With a touch of a button, you can get to what you need. You can jump to a piece of that device that you want to get to. I think that it also represents interoperability. Now, the way it represents interoperability is that you can download apps. You don't have to download a Samsung app or a Apple app or a Google app. I mean, you download apps that are interoperable across the multiple platforms. That's a trend. That's something that's really important. If you can become good at this, if you can become good at examining trends, you will be amazed at what you discover. If you just step back and say, wait a minute, what is the trend that is behind all these things that I'm seeing? And that's the difference between a trend and a fad. A trend, you'll see it behind a lot of different things. You'll see multiple things that underlie that trend. A fad is just, a color of a coat that's in fashion for a season, but the next season is not in fashion. That's a fad. Trends really underlie a lot of things that you see. So sometimes what I like to do when I see a technology, particularly if it's past first form, if it's, further on down the road in terms of its manifestation, is I'll ask myself, what does that technology represent in the form of trends? What does it represent? If you can do this, you would be amazed at all the things you'll see and how you'll be able to forecast. So in this particular project, Project One, if you choose to do this one in technology forecasting, one of the things that I think is useful is to go through those referent disciplines. So you go through the information, life, materials, chemicals, and you don't have to go through all of them. just take one that you think's interesting, or maybe two if you see two of them that are closely related, and ask yourself, what are the trends? What are the things that are underlying what the companies are doing, how they're building stuff, the things that are becoming popular, if that's the right term, or are certainly becoming more favored in terms of design. What are those trends? And I'll tell you, this is a trick that I learned working with Disney, and the way I started working with them, started doing work with Apple, and then moved over to Pixar, and then to Disney. I still do quite a bit of work with Disney, but they will really go in and try to understand what trends are particularly in motion pictures, and particularly in trying to develop characters, to try to develop storylines, a lot of different things. Give you an example. Certainly, I think it's a popular story, but in Frozen, the original title for that motion picture was going to be The Ice Princess, and it was based on a Hans Christian Andersen fairy tale. And you test that out, and you see that certainly the trends among people who would go to see that movie, which, the age range might be a lot broader than you might expect in that. That meant fairy tale, it meant Beauty and the Beast type of things. And you were leaving out a lot of potential viewers who would not go to it just because of the title. So they tested the other one, Frozen, which seemed a little bit more adventurous, which was a trend, certainly among moviegoers. They wanted more adventure, they wanted more twists, they wanted more complexity in their movie-going experience. These were things that came out of the behavioral sciences that really started to influence the way Pixar and Disney started to cast their films. So again, when you can get on this wheel and start to figure out what the trends are, what the first form technologies are, and what new business models are out there, you can really get behind this idea of technology forecasting. So going into this, here you can see, and this is something that I like to do, is I like to go out and take photographs or find photographs of early physical manifestations of the trends. And here you can see everything from Bitcoin. This is one of the, I usually show this in class. I'm so sad that we're not going to be together, but I've got some mock-ups of early Apple iPods that I keep in my office at UNC, and it's fun to show those. And you can actually see a little bit of technology history there. So maybe when things turn back to normal, you can come by the office and I'll show you some of my museum stuff out there. It's really fun to see. And then, of course, the new business models. New business models are the result of the trends in some of these manifest technologies. Everything from Dropbox to Zoom, which we're using right now. One of my favorites, Looking Glass Factory. Take a look at that company. I've got some video coming up of them in holographic. But you can actually then start to see new business models. And it gives you a way to talk to executives about technology forecasting. So this is where we're going to stop for this video. It's exciting. I mean, I really enjoy going through this with you. Certainly would rather be face-to-face, but doing it this way is okay with me too. I just want to get this information to you. So what you saw tonight up here in Studio 720, high above Chapel Hill, is this idea of technology forecasting, how it's done, how to look beyond just the technologies themselves and look into these reference sciences for clues about how technology is changing, and to really start to develop some ideas about business. Again, I want you to keep your MBA business caps on, because we need that kind of thinking in the technology field out there, and really start thinking about the different business models that might be the result of some of the things that you're seeing. Well, that's all for this recording. The next time we get together, we will go into the 7 technologies and we'll begin with pervasive computing. So I'm looking forward to seeing you then.